All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. I am Carly Endries, the Outreach Coordinator for the North Dakota Brain Injury Network. Just some housekeeping today. We have Vocational Rehabilitation speaking to us. And then on September 8th, we have Greg Little, who is a survivor, who is going to talk to us about his experiences in the book he wrote. We are then taking September 22nd off. This will all be updated on our website as well, but that is NASHA's conference, the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. So we all go to that virtually, and we would encourage you guys to come as well if you can. So we won't be meeting for Web Wednesday that week, but we do have October and November pretty much full. So be looking for those upcoming announcements from me. I'm excited to have Voc Rehab here today. We get quite a bit of assessments or quite a bit of questions related to this area. So we thought it would be a good topic to bring you guys in for. So we have Josie Uthke. She's a vocational rehabilitation counselor and assessment specialist who works in the Grand Forks area. Josie adapts play therapy equipment for disability needs and runs a neuroaffirmative support and resource group. Josie lives with her family and children in the Manville Grand Forks area. She has experience with accommodation strategies, processing emotions around disability identity, navigating the medical community, and advocating for disability needs on both a personal and professional level. And then we also have Lori Rodgers, who for the last 3.5 years has served the state and the Vocational Rehabilitation Department as a business services specialist. She has 19 years of experience working with individuals with disabilities. As a business service specialist, she has developed successful partnerships with businesses in the Grand Forks and Devils Lake areas to help meet their workforce needs by providing disability-related solutions. She also assists individuals needing assistance with resume writing, job searching, and interviewing skills with the ultimate goal of helping them obtain and maintain competitive and integrated employment. So welcome, ladies, and thank you for your time. And I think Josie is going to kick it off.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting us here today. We're really excited to be able to kind of talk a little bit more in depth. I want you to feel, if there's any questions at any point, feel free to, unmute yourself, ask the question. I want this to feel, a little bit more conversational, even though we are going over some different material. And so initially, we're going to kind of introduce a little bit about the Voc Rehab process, go a little bit more into detail about what some of those services look like, what the Voc Rehab process looks like. And then I also want to take a little bit of time and kind of get to the heart of, just having some discussion questions, a little bit of roundtable where we talk about, what are some challenges finding employment, and what are some ideas that we can maybe do as far as making that process a little bit easier. So just to kind of get started here, first is, what is vocational rehabilitation? So really the primary mission is to help individuals with disabilities improve their employment opportunities. We also can assist businesses in finding solutions to their disability related issues. So we kind of work two parts. On one hand, we can help in finding employment. We can also help in maintaining employment. If there is already employment, we can help the individual who is looking for employment or to maintain it. We also can offer some services to businesses to help them. Voc Rehab, it's a federal state program. So there's actually one in every single state that's available. We're very much committed to helping people with disabilities find meaningful careers. So this is going to be kind of a process as far as looking at what works with your interests, what works with your disability needs, where is a place that you'd really like to work at? Kind of really getting to the heart of what is a meaningful career, and not just finding, anything that's available. As far as who is eligible for Voc Rehab services, um, eligibility for individuals to either obtain or maintain that employment. The individual has to have a documented long-term disability or impairment. There's some different examples of that. Physical. For example, this might be if you've had a long-term injury. For example, there's some different physical type of disabilities, limitations, chronic pain, mental. So this can be a wide variety again. For example, depression, anxiety, some different personality type disorders. We also help with learning disabilities, if there are addiction concerns. We are also looking at, if you have a different neurotype, for example, if you are autistic or have ADHD, we can support that as well. So we're really kind of looking at that long-term piece as far as either the disability and impairment. And one thing I do want to point out here is, especially when you're kind of looking at these pamphlets and this language, is that it follows a little bit more of that medical model, where we're kind of looking at the impairment piece of disability. But Voc Rehab, we very much follow that social model as well, where we're looking at strengths, we're looking at differences, so kind of for that language piece as well, we really want to look at the strengths of someone. And if you use different language in order to, discuss your disability or your neurotype, we definitely can do that. TBI, as an example, would be something that would be eligible. What does the DVR process look like? So there's a few different steps that are required in order to engage in the Voc Rehab process. The very first one is being able to complete your application. And so what you would do there is you would actually contact the Voc Rehab office, and there's a person who can help you with that application piece as well. There's some flexible options with how to do it. If you prefer to do it over the phone or virtually, if you'd like to come in and do that. And then that application piece has got some different forms with it, along with releases of information. We're going to go into these different slides a little bit more into detail, but just to give you kind of that brief overview. So after you complete the application, then you have to complete an intake with your counselor. The counselor has 60 days to determine eligibility, and they'll be looking at medical records. There might be, if there aren't enough medical records, perhaps doing additional evaluation might be something that we can do. Then we would look at doing any career assessments, plan development after eligibility has been determined. We have up to 90 days to do that. In some certain circumstances, we can do a plan extension. After the plan is developed, then we're going to sign the plan. That signature piece is really important. Once signatures are obtained, then all the services that were on the plan, we can go ahead and authorize for financial services, start engaging in some of those different activities that we talked about. Then successfully maintaining work for 90 days. So after, we have this plan, we're going to look at finding a right work site in order to be able to do those services with work. And that can look a little bit different as far as what level of support we might need to help find the job. But then once you've been successful and stable for 90 days, Voc Rehab is really designed as kind of a short-term type program. We'll go ahead and close your case out at that point. There are post-employment services that are available. Also, Voc Rehab can be used more than once in your lifetime. So going a little bit further into kind of what that looks like. So this is an example of the actual application. Um, and the best way in order to get this application would be just to call the Voc Rehab office. Right now we have Mary who helps us. We'll also have Marie that'll be kind of stepping into that role. And if you need any assistance filling this piece out, they're great as far as being able to sit down and go through all of these different pieces of it. Now, in addition to this, there's also an application supplement that's going to go a little bit more into your work history. There's a few more questions on that. Releases of information are going to be signed. With our program, confidentiality is very important. And because we're dealing with medical records, the only way we share that information is if we do the release of information. So that's kind of all the application piece of it. And then after that, you're going to be assigned a counselor. And as far as the counselor goes, if you have any preferences with a counselor, you can go ahead and let those be known, or if there's a specific counselor you want to work with. Otherwise, you're going to be just assigned a counselor. They're going to contact you and set up a time to do an intake appointment. And with this intake appointment, that's where you get a chance to kind of meet and greet with your counselor, go through what your goals are, what you're hoping to get out of Voc Rehab. Your counselor is going to go through this process in more detail with you as well. And then you kind of collaborate together as far as how you want to do that next step. Then after that, we have that 60 days to determine eligibility. And you'll get a letter in the mail when that occurs. So with 60 days, typically it can sometimes take a lot shorter than that if we get medical records back quicker. If you have a copy of your own medical records that you can provide, in those cases, then this process can sometimes be sped up to a couple of weeks. So then after you've been found eligible for services, then that's the piece where you're going to get kind of more into the plan. Now going into like, what are some of the different things you can add onto your plan? Like, what are some of these different services that we provide? So diagnosis and evaluation. Sometimes when we do look at medical records, they may be out of date. They might not be complete enough to determine eligibility. In that case, your counselor can send you out for additional diagnosis and evaluation. There might be other reasons why you might want some diagnosis and evaluation even after having been found eligible. For example, with vision, that's something that we can assist with, looking at if you need a vision evaluation, getting frames and glasses. We have some options of dental. This is a little bit more restricted. Pretty much the dental can't be just regular maintenance, but if there's something outside of that where it's affecting communication or it's affecting being able to work on the job, then that could be another thing that can be sent out. AT evaluation is another one. We work with North Dakota Assistive Technology. So they can kind of, that's another gray area that we can look at for additional evaluation. Perhaps there are times where you might need a little bit more information as far as your disability or limitations are concerned. We can do psychiatric evaluations as well and send out for those. Looking at the vocational counseling and planning, this is going to be really the piece where you're going to be working with your counselor. And each case is very individual. So there's going to be a very customized approach to use. Our idea when we're creating these plans is that you're going to really be in the driver's seat as far as the plan is concerned. The role of the counselor isn't to determine where you will or won't work at, or that they mandatorily, look at different services that you need. But this is very much a collaborative approach as far as what are your goals? What are you hoping to get out of Voc Rehab, and how can we help? How can we help support? And when kind of looking at creating that plan, there's going to be a lot of things that we can do for that. We're going to look at labor market information. We're going to explore what some of your different short-term and long-term goals are, and then kind of work together to figure out what are the different services that you might need for that. Career assessment and exploration activities. So this is something that you can engage as much or as little as you want to. One of the things that's great about looking at some different career assessment and exploration activities is it can really give you a lot of information as far as what career matches might match your personality style, what is your learning style, being able to look at your transferable skills. So I have a bunch of different kinds of career assessments and activities that kind of hit all of these different areas that you see on the side here. And they include ones you can do in person. There are some that you can do on the computer. There are worksheets. We also have activities. And this would be something that we would go through as far as, you know, what different career assessments and tools would you like to explore and use? And this is going to kind of depend a little bit, again, on what your goals are and what you're hoping to get out of Voc Rehab. If you're someone who's a little bit more creative, we can also do creative-based career exploration where we actually get to use some art supplies. We can do some different goal setting around that. In addition to doing career assessment activities, we can create social stories for work or the process of work or training, video resumes. Sometimes, you know, if you might need a little bit more help in figuring out how to organize the workplace or use different organizational systems. For example, there are some really neat visual and tactile organizational systems that you can use in the workplace. That's something that we could go over together. Budgeting. Budgeting is going to be a really important part of, you know, kind of looking at your overall goals and your work. And that can be tricky sometimes. So we've got some different apps. I even have a few fun games for budgeting. We can even do the more traditional paper and pen. It's going to really all depend on what you may or may not want to do. And I do have a handout for this. So when you meet with your counselor, and if this is something that you want to engage in, then we can work with your counselor to go into all of these in detail, and you can kind of pick and choose what would work for you. Looking at coping tools. So some examples of this might be daily affirmations, for example. We have different games to explore values. We can practice different meditation and mindfulness that's really related to disability and kind of how that relates to the stress of the job hunt. So being able to practice some of those. Also being able to prepare for an interview. That we can do mock interviews. We can look at different resources together. It's going to kind of depend on exactly what you're hoping to get out of, you know, that interview piece and what you're needing help with. Information and referral. So this is something that's actually offered with every counselor and every plan. There may be some things that Voc Rehab may not be able to assist with. However, we may know an agency that can. So what we will do is we'll give you some information and referral as far as other agencies or other resources that you can access in order to help with that problem that you have. An example of this is 211. This is actually something that you can call, and there'll be someone on the phone, an operator, that can go through different community resources if you have crisis needs, financial needs. Another example when we might do information and referral is if you receive SSI or SSDI benefits, we can do benefits planning through RSI. And what this is this is where you're going to have a benefits planner sit down with you and go through, okay, when we're getting this new job, how is that going to impact benefits? Is there, you know, is there a certain amount of hours I can work? At what pay? Do my benefits reduce? And so being able to really have someone who can go through that on an individual level, that can help provide, some better information as far as future budgeting and, really being informed as far as what the different work tasks and work sites, how that's going to impact your benefits. Adaptive equipment in AT. This is something that can be added into a plan. Now, assistive technology, this is a very broad term. It can be as something as basic as perhaps having a day planner that we purchase off of Amazon. So you're able to use that for scheduling management. Sometimes this may be a lot more complex. For example, if there's maybe certain communication needs, we can actually do an evaluation with North Dakota Assistive and go through some different higher level assistive technology. There's apps, programs. There's so many really awesome types of assistive technology. Also, if you have a prescription for assistive technology and perhaps your insurance doesn't cover it, that's something that we can look at as far as helping purchase as well. We do use a financial participation sheet. So it would really be kind of dependent on that income level piece, but we're able to really do oftentimes a lot of generous assistance with adaptive equipment in AT. Physical and mental restoration services. So some examples of this would include dental, vision, medication, hearing aids. Now, one of the things that we do have to do before we're able to purchase anything in this area is we have to look at comparable services and benefits. So sometimes that might be, if you've got insurance that might cover part of this, we would look at that first. Other examples might be if there's another agency in town that offers a grant or they have a program that can assist in being able to help purchase some of this, we would look to see if you would qualify for that and if we could work with them as well. And that's kind of what we discussed earlier a bit. Dental is a little bit more limited. That's in very specific needs. Vision, that's definitely an area we can help with. Oftentimes people don't have access to dental and vision services. Medication is something we can help with short term. Hearing aids, this is something where if you even, you have a job already or you're looking for employment, you notice that you're starting to get some of that hearing loss, we can send you for an evaluation for your hearing and then to see if hearing aids is something that is recommended. If it is, that's an area that we can financially assist with. Maintenance. So some other things that are important when thinking about reaching that career goal is, do you have the right work clothes and shoes? And if you don't, this is something that we can help purchase. And this is going to be very work site dependent. Some work sites may have scrubs and a special kind of shoe that you might want to wear. Other work sites may require kind of more business type clothing, dressier type clothing. So it would really be working with you as far as looking at what kind of clothes would you need for an interview, what kind of clothes would you need when you first start work, and then working together to create an authorization with a vendor. And then that's something that can get added. Relocation and training expenses. So one of the things that we can help with is you don't necessarily need to find a career or a job right in Grand Forks. If there is a job offer and it is even across the state and that is somewhere that you want to work at and you have that job offer, then we can actually look at helping pay for, the U-Haul, helping pay for maybe initially, getting you into some housing that you're able to access while you have that new job. Same with training. Different vocational goals are going to have different levels of training that may be needed. If you have to go out of town for that training piece, we can look at helping out with travel expenses, housing expenses in certain circumstances with that. Phone cards, this is something we can typically help with. It's short term, but perhaps if you're in need of a phone card in order to get a hold of your boss, get a hold of your Voc Rehab counselor, that's something that can be added into your plan and that your VR counselor can assist with. Transportation, so as far as, being able to get to and from vocational activity. Bus pass, so like a monthly bus pass is something that can be written into your plan. Gas, if, for example, you are driving yourself or you have someone else who's driving, we would get a copy of a driver's license, insurance, registration. And then once that's squared away, like say you're starting a job and you need to figure out gas as far as how to get to and from that work shift. So we would use some gas buddy calculations, figure out, where the home address is, where work is, and how much gas you're going to need in a month. And an authorization can be written for that. So you're able, to help a little bit with that cost before you get those first few paychecks. Grand Forks Taxi. This is another one. Same with Dial-A-Ride. Sometimes there might be other circumstances where a bus pass or, gas isn't going to be a good transportation method. So then we would look at other options that we could do. Training. So when looking at your vocational goal and what kind of training would be required for that, some vocational plans can actually be out quite a few years. So I have some people, for example, that are doing college or graduate level school. Their plans are out 4 or 5 years. There are other people who are wanting to, get into work right away, and maybe they're looking for more on-the-job type training, shorter term training. That's something that we can assist with. You might have something that needs more of a certificate or apprenticeship type training. We can look into that. There's education levels, at the 2-year, 4-year, and beyond. So this would really be looking at your vocational goal and seeing, what is the educational level you need in order to be able to do this job and at a competitive level. And if there's certain licenses, if there's certain training that's needed, then that's something that can be discussed with your counselor and added into your plan. Employment supports. So there's a wide range of employment supports that can be added into a vocational rehabilitation plan. There's both short-term and long-term job coaching and placement services. So an example of long-term job coaching is typically you would have a case manager, and you might be looking at needing, long-term job coaching for kind of the duration of your career. And in order to do that, we definitely have some options for looking at long-term job coaching. And then when your case closes with DVR, then there's another agency we'd be working with. Oftentimes it's extended services through Northeast, but then they would kind of help pick up that financial piece to be able to continue that long-term job coaching and support. For some people, they need more short-term. So what this might look like is we would contact an outside job coaching agency. They would go through, with you what your vocational goals are and help assist in finding a work site for you, and then offering some of that short-term job coaching for maybe a few months, where it would be just kind of building up those initial skills, making sure natural supports are developed on the job, helping with any accommodations that may be needed. And then the idea is eventually you may be able to not need as much job coaching, and then you're working independently. On the job training with the employer, this is similar to that short-term job coaching. A difference with this is you wouldn't be using an outside job coach that would be coming into the office with you or into your work site. There's also some off-site options for job coaching. But with that on the job, it would really be the employer who would be looking at, what are the work tasks and skills that need to be developed. And then Voc Rehab would provide a financial incentive for your employer to help provide that additional training when you have that job. We also have our wonderful business specialist, Lori. She's a very great asset for our Grand Forks team. So in cases where you might not necessarily need that job coaching support, Lori can still help provide a lot of one-on-one services as far as, creating applications, job searching, doing some different activities with that. And I'll actually let her go ahead and kind of describe all the different things that she does.
Sure. Thanks, Josie. So like Josie said, I work hand in hand with the individuals. Josie, if you want to go back one slide, I'll just kind of go through those. Yep, perfect. So once an individual has a plan in place, so they've worked with the counselor to decide what goal of employment they have, sometimes they can be referred to me and I will work with them to try and get that employment. So I can be the bridge between them and an employer. If we're talking about maybe doing some on-the-job training with the business, I will discuss with the business what on-the-job training is, what that looks like, kind of negotiate how long that's going to take, what the financial reimbursement is going to be. Sometimes it's just educating the employer on reasonable accommodations and what their obligations are. Sometimes folks just want help job searching and they don't want their employer to know, or they don't want to disclose a disability, and that's their option too. Or I know counselors work quite a bit with self-advocacy as well. So, helping that person disclose that disability, should they want to disclose with their employer. And yeah, my portion can be small with an individual, like just job searching. I don't really have a magic tool of how I do the job searching. I utilize the same platforms that every individual uses. Indeed.com, the job service website, is a great one to use. Word of mouth, Facebook. There's such a workforce shortage here in Grand Forks, in the state and the nation, that now is the best time of any to be doing some job searching and really honing and creating what would be the best opportunity for you, because there's jobs aplenty out there. So job searching, applications, sometimes navigating an online application can be quite difficult for individuals, especially if there's an assessment at the end, or if there's questions at the end asking if they have a disability. It's educating individuals that that's for a tax credit and not something to use to discriminate against you with. So I can help out with applications. I can help out with job shadows. And so job shadows are for individuals that may have a particular interest in the industry, but really want to see it and observe it first before deciding whether or not it would be a good fit for them to apply. So I get a release of information signed in order to talk to a business and ask them if Joe Smith can come do a job shadow where it's just observational. It's nothing hands-on, but a person can watch tasks being done for an hour or so to get a better understanding, for those visual learners that need to see it being done. I do that quite a bit with younger individuals, ones that don't have any work history and might want to see what hotel housekeeping looks like and then decide from there. But also I work with individuals that maybe they're new to their disability. It's a new disability and they need to change their career path because of that disability. And so they want to see what else is out there. So job shadows is another thing. Informational interviews is when maybe the work site would be a little too hazardous or dangerous, and an employer wouldn't be necessarily comfortable with having somebody observe and watch, maybe construction, for instance. So they can sit down with the employer and ask questions. What is a typical day in the life of somebody that works here? What does that look like? And so that's an informational interview. A lot more of those were taking place due to COVID. Creating resumes, that's something I do quite a bit of. teaching individuals maybe the do's and don'ts, or helping them creative. A lot of people, they've just never created one before, and so they don't even know where to start. We have a lot of great resources at our fingertips. So I've got some templates to use. There's a lot of things out there that people wouldn't know exist if nobody showed them. So we do a lot of teaching that way too, and working with potential employers to set up OJTs. That was the other one. OJT standing for on the job training. So those are the main things that I do. I also spend a handful of my time just going out to businesses and agencies, letting them know of the services that we provide. I get so many responses of, oh, I didn't know you guys did all that. Or, not only do we work with individuals that are looking for work, we want to help those that are already working and might be struggling. So that might be as simple as, if somebody were having difficulties or struggling on the job due to back pain or an injury that is permanent, and they're seeking help from their human resources, we could be a resource to human resources to come up with solutions, accommodations that can be provided on the job. Maybe it's as simple as purchasing an ergonomic chair for them to use. So yeah, we like to be the resource that businesses can go to when somebody is requesting an accommodation. We also use other agencies. AskJon.org is a great one to use, a great one to reference. So yeah, it's a lot of education and providing resources to individuals also. All right, next slide. So just a quick review of what Josie has already mentioned. If this seems like something that an individual is interested in doing and they would benefit from our services, step one would be to call and apply for services. Like she said, it can be done over the phone, the application, or you can come in person and do the application. There's 8 locations for vocational rehabilitation located around the state. And we'll give you those locations here in a couple slides, but you would need to apply to the location that's closest to you, because that's where you're going to be receiving services. Should you live in Grand Forks but are planning to move to, say, Bismarck, it's just as simple as transferring a case. You wouldn't have to open up a new one. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, you would need to sign a release so we can obtain the medical records to confirm that you indeed have that disability. Again, we can take up to 60 days to get those records. Unless you already have them, that would be the best case scenario. You would be paired with a voc rehab counselor. And I mean, these counselors, they are certified rehabilitation counselors. They've gone through a professional master's program for this specifically. So I mean, really, you're working with professionals in this area. So that's something I want folks to keep in mind. And then they are the ones that develop your plan of employment. Again, that can take up to 90 days, especially if we're doing the assessments and things and brainstorming and collaborating with your counselor. Some folks, they have a really great idea of what they want to do and how they want to do that and the path they want to go along, but not everybody does. And so that's what that exploration piece is, and those 90 days are for. Again, they can go over that 90 days. It's just an extension that would need to be done. And then they would work with that counselor and possibly me to actually obtain that employment. And then the counselor is checking in with them on a regular basis while they're on the job, making sure they're happy, they're successful, working through any roadblocks that might come up. And then once they're employed for 90 days from a stable date, and I think it might be a good idea to let people know what a stable date is, and I'm going to let Josie do that. But once the 90 days from stable date is achieved, then your case is closed. Doesn't mean you can't come back, even if it's something just as simple as okay, I need a couple more outfits, your case can be quickly opened up again for post-employment services and then closed. Or, you know, if you lose your job and you just want to go through the process of looking for new employment, you would probably have to start back at the beginning, but we would already have your records because we have to keep them for 7 years. So the process would likely go quicker. So Josie, while I mentioned it, do you want to say what a stable date is?
Yeah, sure. I'll definitely touch on that a little bit more. So what a stable date is, we recognize that it's going to be individualized for every person as far as when you're feeling that, you're working on the job, that you're feeling like, okay, everything is going well. This is fitting my disability needs. This is something I want to do. I'm happy with my employment. And there's different reasons for that. For example, if you have someone where maybe there doesn't need to be a lot of adaptive equipment or things like hearing aids, there aren't necessarily job coaches, it's kind of more of that traditional job searching, finding employment, they might honestly be ready to have that stable date be very close to the start date. It might simply be, the main thing I need help with is really being able to find that job. And then once I find that and I start doing the work, that stable date can be pretty close. Now, for someone else, that stable date may actually be out quite a ways, even if they started employment. So if you have someone that might need a little bit of extra help with job coaching, or say we have that on the job training where the employer is helping teach some of those skills, the stable date wouldn't start until after that training piece has been completed. If you're looking at long-term job coaching, that would be a team decision where everyone would kind of talk about, this is the baseline. This is going to be kind of the best baseline that this employee is going to have with the job. They're still going to need long-term support. So that's where they end up getting referred to that other agency after the VR case closes. But that initial stable date might be 6 months after the initial start date. Now, if you have someone who's already working, this is where it can look a little bit different too with that stable date. Let's say, for example, you're coming in with a lot of pain and difficulty and mobility issues, and you might need something like a functional capacity eval. And that's where you're going to get sent out and someone's kind of going to go through all those mobility concerns with you and see, hey, would you be a candidate for maybe some mobility equipment? This could be something like a walker, this could be a motorized cart, but kind of looking at that, if you're someone with a hearing impairment, perhaps having hearing aids might be something that's beneficial for you. And then so it would be a matter of, we would, authorize that equipment, order it. Once it's ordered, you might need a little bit of time to practice using it on the work site. But once you're feeling comfortable, like, hey, I figured out how to use this motorized scooter, or I know, I've got everything figured out with the hearing aids, so I'm feeling comfortable communicating, then at that point, we would put your stable date. So I guess that's kind of the difference between the start date and the stable date with that piece.
Thank you. And I wanted to give you guys some numbers because it kind of goes to illustrate, how long someone can be with vocational rehabilitation on our case, while they're obtaining their education and things. So last year we had about 1,300 clients statewide, and 525 of them were closed successfully with employment. So, 525 to 1,300, well, a major chunk of those were students going through training. And so, a lot of people will call us when they're like in crisis mode and they need a job now. And our services don't work that quick. It's more of a long-term collaboration, exploration type thing. And so that's another thing that I want folks to keep in mind. Next slide, please. All right, so here is some frequently asked questions that I get, and Josie touched on them. Do you help with schooling? Yes. That is an example of when we look at a person's income to determine how much we will help with schooling. And there's the type of algorithm that they use to where we might pay a percentage of their schooling, and then we, they are responsible for the rest of the percentage. However, if they have prior schooling in which they have loans in default, then we wouldn't be able to help out with schooling. So that's one caveat to that piece. Do you help with rent? Josie touched on this a little earlier when it came to relocation costs and training fees. That's when we would help out with rent. Those are the two scenarios that we are allowed to, and we're governed by the Rehabilitation Services. I don't know if I'm saying that right. RSA. We're governed by a federal program, and so every dollar has to be good use of state dollars and federal dollars. So we can't help with rent other than relocation or training costs. What if you have a criminal background? Certainly, it happens, and we won't turn anyone away based upon criminal background. We might work with the employer to try and explain to them maybe a situation as to why you have that criminal background. We also can work with job service because they have a federal bonding program to which an employer can kind of like take out almost like an insurance policy on an individual, and to try and mitigate that risk that an employer might feel. So yeah, we don't turn anyone away based upon criminal background. There's no income requirements. Again, your income will be looked at when it comes to payment for services, but other than that, there's no income requirements. There's no age requirements. We just ask that you're of age to work, and so that's typically at least 16 years old. In some instances, it could be younger, but typically it's 16. And we do a lot with the youth. We go into the high schools. I've taught like a work skills workshop where we talk about interview clothes and what's appropriate to wear and how to answer interview questions. We also have a program that typically takes place in the summertime called Work Experience, where we let a student try out a job for 6 to 8 weeks, and they work between 10 and 20 hours a week. And it's to build that work ethic and give them a work history and some skills to build upon. We're looking at doing that with adults as well. We haven't fine-tuned what that policy is going to look like, but work tryouts, that's going to be another one of our programs. And then there's also
can I interrupt you right there, because that's kind of my big question is like, okay, so I taught special education prior to this role, and I taught intellectual disabilities, so I'm pretty familiar with like an IEP and a transition IEP, and I know that they're kind of working on work skills, but I feel like now doing what I do with brain injury, those kiddos aren't necessarily on an IEP. And how do we, like, as Andy Bin, how do you think we could help like build up that pre-voc area, or that, like, I don't know, is there, because there's like the transition program in certain areas, like Grand Forks has a great one, but not all of our rural communities really have that either in North Dakota. So a lot of our kids aren't, well, if they're on IEPs, they might not be getting exposed to like a transition program, that 18 to 21. And then if they're not on an IEP, but they still struggle with like those work skills, like, what do you think? Should we bring you guys into those types of cases, like when they're young, or I don't know?
Josie, this is a question for you.
Sure. Yeah. So there's actually quite a few different ways that I think would be very effective in helping reach that student population and youth population. Yeah. One thing that we have is we have both adult voc rehab cases, and then we also have what's called pre-ETS cases, and these are for students, and we can go as young as even 14, and oftentimes we work with schools. Different school districts have some different transition services, but often they kind of work in combination with doing some different career exploration and activities. I know in not all areas though has this been You know, it seems like it's kind of been missed a little bit, and that there's definitely some room for improvement in how can we reach these students, because you're right, there seems to be this myth that the only students who would be eligible for voc rehab would have to have an IEP, and you don't. You can have an IEP, a 504, perhaps you have a disability, a different neurotype, or maybe another type of condition that's occurring for you that isn't necessarily where you need a 504 or IEP, but there are still some services and things that would be beneficial. Yeah, we can definitely voc rehab. You can apply for that. Some of the things that people are doing around the state, because I'm that assessment specialist, we've been coordinating on starting some different COVID-friendly ways to reach students as well, because that's definitely been very challenging for everyone, especially if that job shadow piece. So we're trying to think of, what are some ideas? Some places are exploring virtual job shadow, also kind of with virtual reality. We have jobs groups, both for students and for adults. And this is something where students can meet on a regular basis with other students and just really explore, different career exploration, exploring a little bit more about, being able to goal set, figuring out what you want to do in training, but in a really fun way, something that's, designed more for kids. And we've also talked about how in some cases, we can even have other students involved with that as well. Some other ways, definitely giving presentations to the school, both in person and virtually, and making sure that we let teachers and parents know that, yes, you don't need to wait for an IEP at all. If you want to get started on this, the sooner, the better, just because if you've got that counselor, then what's nice is if you've got that student application, then you're able to transition right into that adult plan, and there's not that waiting period where if you wait until they're an adult in order to do voc rehab, then you're going to have that initial, we have to do the intake, we have to get eligibility medical records. But if we have someone who's already a student, we can bypass that entire piece. And where that can be really handy is that summer of, we're trying to get ready for training, we're trying to figure out job, we're trying to figure out school, everything we need. It can be a little bit overwhelming figuring out accommodations, either on a work site or, at a post-secondary type of education, because it looks different than high school. So if you're used to that IEP process, and then all of a sudden it's just like, okay, well, now how do I transition? And I think, being able to really work with other people, we're very, very receptive to working with teachers, professionals, any other agencies where we can do team meetings. And I've got, on the assessment part, I've got some really cool workbooks and different games and things that are designed for students, because, we recognize that, learning about voc rehab is probably not the most exciting thing for a 15-year-old, or, thinking about some of those questions of budgeting. So that's like why I have a video game. If I have a 16-year-old who's trying to figure out, how do I budget for school and figure out work, we can do a video game with that to try and make it a little bit more fun. So, I definitely see where we've got some strengths in working with students. There's also going to be a lot of cool stuff that's being developed. And if you're an agency, a professional, or even a parent, and you've got some of your own ideas as far as how we can reach out to you, how we can make this a better process for you, let us know. Because that's how, we're able to keep increasing what we can do and what services we can provide. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. I didn't know we could reach out as young as 14, so I love to hear that. And yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Was there any other questions at this time? And the last thing I was going to touch on was the tribal VR and veteran voc rehab. And so a veteran can have a case open both with veteran voc rehab and state voc rehab. We're not going to do the same thing. We're not going to duplicate services, but you can have a case open in both areas at the same time. Same with tribal voc rehab. If you're a registered member of a tribe and you want to go through tribal voc rehab and state voc rehab, you can, or you can choose one or the other. It doesn't matter. Again, we're not going to do the same thing, but I had mentioned earlier that there's 8 locations located around the state. And so here's where those 8 locations are, and those phone numbers would be who to call in order to get an application going. And I think that's it.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Most of the programs that you're looking at, or it seems like you're really addressing the younger crowd. So my question is, what do you do for an individual who actually has to maintain their home and everything that comes with it? Because let's face it, being able to work only 10 to at the most 20 hours usually isn't going to cut it. So is there a program for the older folks where they can actually get a full-time job that will hopefully help them make a living and still get your help?
Yeah. And so one of the things that we would look at is we would really want to talk about what your goals are. Some people, if they're getting SSI, SSDI, they prefer part-time work. There's other individuals who would prefer full-time work or even doing more than one job. We've had cases where people have had more than one job position, or even people working over 40 hours. I think, part of this question is also asking, are there any considerations as far as what that job process looks like for a mature adult? And, some of the things that come up with that job process. And there definitely is. And even adding that disability piece to it, I think, addressing ageism in the workplace. Sometimes if you're in a position where maybe you had a very physical career and now we're needing to look at cross training, it can be a little daunting to try and figure out, how do I start with trying to learn computer skills if this is something I haven't done before, but it's something that I'm really interested in, and for disability reasons might be something we need. So then we would look at what would be some good options for training. And for some people, there's even some places around town where you can go and you can work with someone, and they also work more with that mature adult population. We have an SCP program in North Dakota with the Adult and Aging Services. This is pretty cool, and you're eligible for it at 55. And what they do is they offer paid training for you to be able to learn work skills. So it's similar to that idea of work experience or an OJT, but it would be very much addressing more of those more mature adult concerns. And then, you'd have a case manager that you'd be working with to develop these skills. Once those skills are developed, then looking at finding that meaningful employment piece. And sometimes meaningful employment can mean different things to different people. When I think about meaningful employment, I also think about retirement accounts, making sure I have health insurance, making sure I have life insurance for my children, having a flexible schedule. Those are things that, a 19-year-old might not necessarily be on their top radar as far as what, are meaningful things. So it would really be also looking at all those areas of employment. What is it that you're needing? What is your minimum income level? What are your transferable skills? What are the accommodations you might need at work? And then also those other important pieces like being able to have enough money to take care of the family. Does this employment have benefits? Does this employer offer a schedule that can work with those needs? And if there is additional training or cross training that needs to happen, you know, being able to work with someone or that other agency that I talked about where they have experience and they understand the different challenges that can occur in the job search with a mature adult as opposed to just, you know, like young kids starting out and trying to gain work experience, because those can look very different for people.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, I may look like I'm close to 70 and I have all the gray hair and stuff, and even though I was born in 1951, I'm only 35 years old, just so you know.
Oh, I disagree. I'm thinking it's more like 27.
Oh, thank you.
Look at those fabulous glasses. 35 is pushing it.
I'm really starting to like you.
Did we have any other slides after this, Josie?
We do. We've got a couple of discussion slides. So one of the things I'm interested in is, does anyone need a break at all, or would you feel comfortable just diving right into? I've got 4 discussion slides.
Let's go right into it from me.
All right, we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so if this first one is, what challenges come up for you when job searching? Or if you work with individuals, what challenges have you seen that are kind of coming up in that job searching process?
And you can put your answer in the chat too if you don't feel like unmuting your mic.
I feel I haven't looked for jobs lately, but I've been retired. And since I've been retired, I've had a couple more injuries. But I'd like to see about getting part-time, but I've found my problem when I'm visiting, talking with people verbally, I don't have called an educated communication. And my response is not, how am I say? It's hard for me to find words to communicate. However, I found it's easier for me to text message when I answer things, but I don't like that typing takes too long. And that kind of gives me a fear. And at my age, I figure I shouldn't even think about going to even part-time job because I'm 76 years old.
So yeah, I'm kind of hearing you say, you know, there's that fear of, you know, it'd be kind of nice to be able to maybe just find some part-time work, even if it's just to socialize a couple hours a week, find something that's meaningful, but trying to figure out how to, you know, communicate on the job the way you want and some of that soft skills piece of it. So there's a couple of different things we could do with that because yeah, it's really nerve-wracking job searching, and especially if it's been a little bit and you know you're working with different types of people. You know, I know for myself, English is my second language, and there are times where when I get nervous, I forget words, I stumble over things, I don't always remember what I want to say, and that can sometimes leave you feeling a little bit anxious, especially when you're trying to portray a certain way you want to communicate with someone. So one thing we could do is we could discuss strategies as far as, you know, what are some things that might help with that. We could explore a little bit of that fear behind it. Assistive technology has got some really cool things where, you know, if it's typing is taking too long, but I want to be able to have another tool I can use to maybe communicate, that could be something we could work with North Dakota Assistive Tech. Other types, there's also the North Dakota aging service. They do some of that work as well. There's some really cool grants available. North Dakota Assistive has a possibilities grant. NDAD also has grants available, which can sometimes cover that assistive tech piece. So that would be an area that I would explore as well. But thank you for sharing. No, that can be, yeah, that can be a big challenge, can it?
Yes, it has. And I used to work for NDAD, and I forgot all about those things that they'd be able to help with, those technologies. I've never thought.
Yeah, and you can use both grants. So if you look at ND Assistive under the possibilities grant, they list all these different cool things they can help with, even including home health care. And then if you look at NDAD, they've got some really, they've got a wide variety of things they can cover too. And you don't have to be with Voc Rehab in order to access those. But I definitely encourage you to check them out, because sometimes it can be as simple as just having some additional tools to use, and it can really broaden the different ways you can communicate.
I do have, that aging home health able to start. I started that about a month ago.
Yeah, no, they're an awesome resource. When you talk to your worker again, that might be something you could mention, is just be like, hey, you know, I'm really interested in exploring if maybe there'd be some more assistive technology that could help me feel more comfortable with communication. And here's a couple of ideas I had. And they could probably, you know, help get that set up for you. But as far as work goes, again, there's no age restriction. So if you're ever interested in, you know, wanting to come and find a little part-time work, we can help with that.
Would that be through Voc Rehab?
Yeah, Voc Rehab, or there's also that SCP program. That's another one that your adult aging worker can talk to you a little bit more about. And the great thing is you can be involved in all of them.
Oh,
You know, if you want to do Voc Rehab, do the job training with the SCP program, you know, you can apply for more than one place, or, you know, if you feel more comfortable just starting in one area, that works too. You know, it really kind of all depends on what would work best for you.
okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right, next question. This is kind of a two-parter. So what would your dream interview look like? And if you could have any accommodations there, what would they be?
I'm gonna bring up a situation I was in a couple weeks ago with an individual, because this was a different type of interview that I've now seen, and I'm wondering if it's going to become more popular. But it was for Target, and their interview consisted of them receiving a link that they had to click on, and they had to be using either a computer or a phone that had a camera, and they would get an interview question that would pop up with 30 seconds to answer it. They would have to answer it on camera. They would be able to watch it once and then re-record it if they wanted to. And then that would be how they answered that interview question. And they had 3 of those questions. And I thought to myself, that would be really difficult for somebody to navigate if they didn't know a whole lot about technology or how to use it. I get that, we're living in a COVID world, and, we have to make things more distanced, and it was an accommodation that they made, but I actually thought that's actually making things more difficult for folks. So that was just something that I encountered.
Oh yeah, and that timed piece. I mean, as soon as you said there was so you have to figure out technology and then kind of get your brain back into interview mode. And then, and then at the same time, there's a time limit. I mean, that gave me anxiety just thinking about trying to do that interview. And then having, that would be really challenging.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, JP.
Well, since no one's going, I'm not looking for a job because my wife is working and it's keeping me up. Well done here. Anyways, the second question, if I were going for a job interview, what I would like more than anything else is that the person that's interviewing me knows what things TBI folks go through and actually know that there are limitations.
Tell me more about that. Tell me more about that piece of what TBI individuals go through.
Well, being able to be understood all the time. The fact that, you know what? Unfortunately, they do forget things. That's probably one of the biggest things. And again, just because they're a TBI survivor doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have other handicaps. And some of them, just like the TBI, may not be so readily easily seen. I think that's it.
I like his comment there. I like your comment. I agree with that. And then what she spoke earlier, these accommodations, I would need to have someone with me to explain. You see, time consuming. I'd need someone with me to explain what that machine, that interview thing is, and explain these questions that they have a little more simple for me to answer or understand.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Do you think it would be at all helpful if you were in an interview where they had interview questions they ask, if you were able to see what those questions were ahead of time so you could practice for it? Or maybe having, if they're giving you information, a little bit more visual or something you can look at in case it's difficult to remember?
That was going to be my comment, was when I interviewed for this position, actually, Rebecca Quinn, it was only 2 people too, which I think is important. I don't think we need to bring out like the Calvary. Sometimes with like a school team, you interview with like literally 6, 7 people and it's just too much. It's hard to focus on, read body language and everybody's writing things down and what are they writing? But when I interviewed for ND Bain, they didn't give me the questions before, but they gave them to me, yes, as a visual to follow in front of me as they were asking them. And I really, really appreciated that. I'm very visual. And if it's like a longer part, question with different answers, then I could, see which one that helped me a ton to have a visual. I don't know if it's quite like, is it fair to give it to you before? I don't know, maybe, because to me, that's not like true interview, because I think they're wanting to see how you do on the spot like that. But I think a visual was super helpful. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. What do you wish employers knew about you?
That I'm able to work just as well as before my injuries, and just as well as anybody else.
Yeah, and I constantly am reminding survivors that, injuries don't usually affect your cognition. It may affect your IQ score by like 10 points, which is really nothing. So I think a lot of people need to understand that about brain injury, that it's not always a cognitive thing. It's, a lot more physical, and it might seem like there's some cognitive things going on, but not necessarily. I think that's important about brain injury in general to know.
I guess the question now comes, how would an employer actually get an information or a feel as to how that brain injury was affecting people? Is there something that you folks provide so that that employer kind of has an idea of what to look for or what to expect?
Yeah, so one of the things that we can offer is sometimes it can be really challenging talking about your disability needs or talking about accommodations, and also just kind of feeling out, is this an employer who is going to be very ableist and difficult to work with? Is this someone who's going to understand my disability needs? And that can create a lot of anxiety. And sometimes that initial conversation can be hard to do by yourself. So one thing we can offer is, we can sign a release of information with your employer. And if you would like us to provide education around your disability, if you have very, specific needs or accommodation requests, that's something that can be done where we can help with that too. Because sometimes if you've got another person with that initial conversation and setting up the accommodations, that can feel a little less anxiety provoking. So that's definitely something we can do if it's something you'd like. Now, other people may prefer more privacy. They may not want to necessarily talk about some of their different accommodation or disability needs, and that's okay too. That's a very individual decision, and if you'd like us to help with that, we certainly can. But if that's something you don't want us to help with, we respect that autonomy. All right, last one. What does a good VR counselor look like to you? So if you are thinking about the idea of, okay, I want to go to Voc Rehab and start job exploring, and you could have, the best counselor you could think of, what are some things that they might do or some values they have? Or on the opposite end, are there any things that counselors could do that would, make it very challenging to work with them?
Basically, if I were looking for a job, the only thing I'd really want from a counselor is simply to understand that a brain injury does affect me or whoever's going for the interview. He's got to be understanding that, you know what, maybe I didn't get the right answer, but maybe I didn't ask the question the way he can or she can answer it. I'm done.
No, I think that's a wonderful point, though. Really having someone who's able to understand not just kind of the basic of the disability, but also how it impairs you specifically, and being able to feel comfortable enough to talk about that. Because sometimes those can be hard conversations to have. You're sharing a lot of vulnerable information, and it's important that you have someone that you feel comfortable being able to talk to about that and who's knowledgeable about that. Anything else anyone can think of?
I personally appreciate when VR counselors reach out to us too for support, kind of the both we play, they pull in all team members and try to make sure it's like a well-rounded plan for that individual. I think all of you guys are really good at that, or the ones that we work with anyway. So I think that's good to bring in all resources, and how you mentioned ND Assist and all those kinds of things, and vision and all of that. I think it's really important to look at all aspects for the person.
Oh yeah, because this isn't a competition of agencies at all for us. And and as
right.
silly as that sounds, sometimes
It
you'll
happens.
actually see that play out.
You do.
And I think that's so awful when that occurs, because really the person who loses is the individual who's trying to get services. And You know, I also believe very strongly in constructive feedback. You know, if you're at a point where you think you know everything and you're the only person who does everything, whew, it's a very, challenging place to be, because I truly believe in that. You should always look for ways to grow, because everything is going to change. Every year is going to change. The work environment's going to change. The resources change. And it's always nice to know what other partnering agencies are doing, some of the advancements in technology, and just ways to collaborate together. Because the more we can collaborate and provide just a wide range of services, because everyone kind of has their own specialty, it's like you get this really amazing team that can work together. And to me, that looks so much better than just someone who's on a bit of an ego trip and just, doesn't really want to stay up to date on what anyone else is doing. So no, I agree wholeheartedly on that.
Well, I guess one other point, both the counselor and the person who's interviewing a potential employee, the only thing I would ask is that both persons look at that individual as an individual, period. He's not a part of a group of anything. He's, even though he is an individual.
Yeah, I mean, it should really be all about the individual. It shouldn't be about the other agencies. It should be very collaborative. And I think it's so important to always remember that every individual is different in their needs and goals and what they want. And that it's so important to remember the individual in the heart of all this. Because I think sometimes it can get easy, like we talked about before with that language piece. Even sometimes it can feel a little pathologicalizing. It can feel a little bit like you're dissecting a person. So to always remember, and I'm part of the disability community myself, and I know how awful that can feel. And so I think it is so important that at the heart of it, we remember that, hey, this is a person, that we're working with, and this is the person who's in the driver's seat, and we're just here to offer support. But I wouldn't even necessarily consider it special needs, but human needs. Everyone has human needs, and they just may look different for each person. So thank you for sharing. But I think that's all the questions I have for you guys today. Is there anything else anyone has a question about or would like to touch on before we leave today?
Well, since there's silence, I do have one question.
Sure.
And it's for Carly.
Hi, JP.
Carly,
Hi.
how's your pretty young lady doing?
My daughter is great. Thank you for asking. She will be 4 in a couple weeks. So
4? Holy moly.
I know. Crazy, huh?
All right.
Excuse me.
All right. Well, thanks, Josie. That was great information and helpful to all of us, whether we're survivors or providers. So yeah, really appreciate it. And I'm going to contact you about some of that stuff for youth, because I have a couple in mind that could benefit from that.
Yeah, definitely. You can contact the office for our direct contact information for myself and Lori. Feel free to call us, send us an email, because sometimes, you think of that question like a week or two later. Yep, always open. You don't need to be a VR client. If you've got any questions and I can help you out, just let me know. But thank you guys for having me today.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.